Imagine building a machine powerful enough to move mountains, only to discover that the real challenge is getting the machine to where it is needed. Join us as we follow enormous industrial components through a chain of transport problems, from assembly and heavy haulage to weak bridges, ocean shipping, railway movement, and terrain where conventional routes simply disappear. Before this giant can lift anything, something else has to lift the giant. What appears at the end as one enormous crawler crane begins here as a collection of massive components. The crawler chassis comes first. Track assemblies establish the machine's wide foundation. Above them, major structural sections are picked up by other cranes, suspended in the air, carefully aligned and lowered into position. Piece by piece, the lifting machine builds upward. Boom sections rise from the assembly ground. Heavy components hang from rigging, while operators control their movement. At the rear, counterweight blocks are stacked into place, forming the mass that will later oppose the enormous forces acting through the boom. Nothing about this assembly can simply be dragged into position. Every component has to arrive at the correct orientation, at the correct height, and close enough for the next connection to be made. The result is a strange reversal of scale. A machine designed to dominate heavy lifting is, for a moment, completely dependent on other lifting machines. And as the final sections come together, the crawler crane begins to look less like a collection of steel parts and more like what it was designed to become: a lifting giant. But giants create another problem before they ever reach the job site. The larger their components become, the harder those components are to move. And that is where the next engineering limit begins. Weight. The giant may be built in pieces, but some of those pieces are already enormous. Here, a 230-ton crane hook has to be moved from the waterfront toward a factory hall. It cannot simply be placed on a conventional trailer. The load sits across a long SPMT platform built from multiple axle lines, spreading its mass over a much larger contact area. That distribution is the key. Instead of forcing hundreds of tons through only a few wheel positions, the transporter divides the load across dozens of wheels beneath the platform. Each axle line carries part of the total mass while the entire transporter moves as one coordinated system. The operation is deliberately slow. As the SPMT carries the hook away from the key, a worker walks close to the transporter with a remote control. From there, steering and movement can be adjusted while the operator watches the clearance around the load directly. The platform continues across the industrial site and approaches the factory entrance. At this scale, even the final meters matter. The load has to remain centered, the transporter has to stay aligned, and the massive component must pass through the opening without losing control of its path. Multiple axle lines solve one problem: weight, but they create no extra space around the load. And once something this large leaves the control factory yard and enters ordinary roads, the next limit is no longer how much the transporter can carry. It is whether the transporter can physically fit through the route. Spreading the weight across many axles solves only part of the problem. Now the load has to turn. A massive cylindrical industrial component moves through public streets on a long multi-axle trailer, accompanied by a police escort. On a straight road, its size is manageable. At an intersection, the geometry changes completely. The front of the transport begins turning while the rear is still approaching the corner. The trailer occupies far more road than an ordinary truck, and the load extends across a space designed for much smaller vehicles. That makes the route itself part of the operation. Traffic has to be controlled while the transporter moves through the junction slowly enough to keep the long load clear of surrounding vehicles, curbs, and roadside infrastructure. There is little value in having enough carrying capacity if the combination cannot negotiate the next corner. For oversized transport, the question is no longer simply, can the trailer carry it? It becomes, can the entire vehicle actually pass through the space ahead? The same problem continues over a much longer route. Here, an oversized drilling component travels on a heavy-duty multi-axle trailer with escort vehicles controlling the movement around it. The transport crosses open roads, passes through changing surroundings, and eventually approaches the entrance to an industrial facility. Every change in the route creates another clearance problem. The transporter must stay within the usable road while the load above it occupies a much larger envelope. Escort vehicles move with the convoy because ordinary traffic cannot interact with a transport like this in the normal way. Its speed, width, and turning space are determined by the load it carries. Even reaching the destination gate does not end the operation. The final approach narrows the available space again. The tractor, trailer, and component have to enter the facility as one long system, with the load remaining clear as the convoy passes from the public road into the industrial yard. By this point, engineers can control the weight. They can control the transporter. They could even control the traffic around it. But there is one thing they cannot control simply by adding more wheels: the strength of the structure underneath them. And when the next structure is a bridge that cannot safely accept the load, the route itself has to be rebuilt. A transporter can spread weight across dozens of wheels. But if the bridge beneath it cannot carry that load, the journey stops. The solution here is not a larger trailer. It is another bridge. Before the heavy component moves, crews first bring modular bridge panels to the site. The sections are laid out, lifted into position, and connected into a temporary structure spanning the existing crossing. Workers assemble the panels section by section. Connection points are aligned, and locking pins are driven into place to tie the structure together. The finished configuration spans about 38 meters and is designed for a maximum load capacity of 220 metric tons. The important detail is where that load goes. Instead of asking the original bridge to carry the transport directly, the temporary system creates a new structural path over it. The heavy transporter can now cross the obstacle without relying on the weaker structure below in the same way. Only after the new route is assembled does the oversized cylindrical load begin moving. The multi-axle transporter approaches slowly, climbs onto the temporary span, and continues across while workers supervise the movement. For most of the journey, engineers adapt the vehicle to the road. Here, they have to do the opposite. They adapt the road to the vehicle. A second project shows the same problem even more clearly. The existing bridge carries a visible 9-ton weight limit, far below what an oversized industrial transport may require. So the crossing is prepared before the load ever arrives. Large steel bridge sections are transported to the site. A crane lifts the structure from the truck while workers prepare the supporting area below. The section is then lowered carefully over the existing bridge and adjusted into position until a temporary crossing is complete. The obstacle has not been strengthened. It has been bypassed. But once the road and bridge are no longer the limiting factor, another constraint appears: distance. Some components are simply too large for a practical journey entirely by road. At that point, the transport has to leave the highway and move onto a ship. A temporary bridge can carry an oversized load across one weak point. It cannot solve a journey that stretches far beyond the road network. At the port, the transport system changes completely. These dismantled crane components first arrive beside the vessel on specialized trailers. Before anything leaves the ground, each piece has to be positioned where the ship's lifting equipment can reach it and where the rigging can control it during the transfer. Slings take the weight. The component rises clear of the trailer, and the problem immediately changes from supporting the load to controlling it in free space. A long steel section cannot simply be lifted vertically and dropped onto the ship. Its orientation has to remain controlled as it passes over the vessel and descends toward the prepared cargo area. Workers guide the operation while the crane lowers each piece into the space assigned to it. Some components disappear into the cargo hold, others are positioned on deck. The sequence continues into the night because each lift affects the space available for the next one. The original shipment involved dismantled container crane components, including boom sections reaching up to 78 meters in length. By separating the cranes into transportable sections, the problem becomes manageable, but only if every section can be lifted, positioned, and stowed in the correct sequence. The same logic becomes even clearer when an entire deck is filled piece by piece. Here in Marsaxlok, cargo begins arriving alongside a 2-meter heavy lift vessel equipped with 2 shipboard cranes. Smaller crates and equipment establish the loading pattern first. Then progressively larger industrial components are brought within reach of the hooks. For each lift, the sequence is essentially the same, but the geometry is never identical. The cargo is connected to the rigging. The crane takes the load gradually until its weight is fully transferred away from the dock. Only then can it be swung toward the vessel. Once suspended, the component has to remain stable enough to clear the ship's side and anything already positioned on deck. Lowering is just as important as lifting. A few meters of vertical movement can determine whether the load reaches the intended space cleanly or interferes with equipment already aboard. The heaviest load recorded during this operation was 140 tons. But capacity alone does not determine where that load can go. Every successful placement reduces the free deck area and changes the space available for later lifts. Cargo already aboard becomes part of the next lifting constraint, forcing the crew to work through the loading plan in a controlled order. Viewed in time-lapse, the process seems fast. In reality, the operation shown here unfolded across several days. Lift by lift, the empty working area disappears until the ship has been transformed into a tightly organized transport platform. Only when the final pieces are positioned can the vessel leave the quay and begin carrying the load over distances that road transport could never handle as efficiently. Another loading operation makes the importance of placement easier to see. Truck cabs, trailers, and heavy construction equipment are already occupying the deck as another vehicle is lifted from the dock. The crane raises it above the ship, but the difficult part is not simply getting the cargo over the rail. The operator has to bring it into an increasingly crowded working area, while crews below watch its position relative to machinery already secured nearby. As the load descends, workers guide the final placement and prepare the deck for the next item. This is what separates heavy lift shipping from simply carrying weight. The ship must accommodate many individual objects while preserving enough access and clearance to complete the entire loading sequence. Every component occupies space that cannot be used again, so a poorly positioned load can complicate everything that follows. Eventually, the lifting stops. But the cargo still cannot travel safely just because it is sitting on deck. At sea, machinery, containers, and structural components must remain restrained against movement. And when the vessel reaches its destination, those restraints have to be removed before the cargo can move again. That next operation brings the engineering problem much closer to the people working beside the load. Once cargo reaches port, movement cannot begin again until the securing system is released. Here, container workers start with the turnbuckles and long lashing rods that have held the stacks in position during the voyage. Each restraint is removed deliberately because stored tension, heavy steel bars, and moving equipment are all concentrated in the same working space. The turnbuckle is released first. The rod is brought under control with both hands, lowered toward the body, and then placed safely on the deck instead of being left where it can become a tripping hazard. Even a simple change in direction matters. A long steel rod can strike another worker if it is swung horizontally without checking the space behind it. Above them, cranes and containers may still be moving. That means the crew must control two things at once: the restraint directly in their hands and the machinery operating around them. Workers maintain clear communication, watch each other's position, and keep 3 points of contact when climbing through the ship. This footage is container delashing, but it exposes a larger principle in cargo handling. Before a secured load can move again, the system holding it still must be dismantled safely and in the right order. And once the load leaves the ship, the route may change again. Sometimes the next few hundred meters are not road at all. They are railway. A road vehicle cannot simply drive onto railway track and begin moving rail cars. It first has to become part of the railway system. Here, a tractor is fitted with a rail guidance system that positions the machine directly over the tracks. Once aligned, it approaches a line of tank cars and closes the final distance slowly until the coupling can be made. From that moment, the tractor is no longer working like an ordinary farm vehicle. Its movement is constrained by the rails beneath it, while the coupling transfers pulling force into the wagons behind. The system allows the tractor to shunt the rail cars forward under controlled movement, with the operator managing the train from the machine itself. What makes this useful is not greater size. It is adaptation. Instead of bringing a dedicated locomotive into every short industrial movement, the vehicle is modified so it can interact directly with railway infrastructure. The route has changed, so the machine changes with it. But rail is still a prepared path. The next step goes further. What happens when the machine must work where no conventional road or railway exists at all? Heavy cranes can position enormous components precisely. But sometimes the machine itself must be rebuilt for the ground ahead. Rail guidance can adapt an ordinary vehicle to one specialized route. But some machines are built from the beginning to move between different working environments. The Colmar T10000 FSC arrives on a low loader before being positioned onto the railway. Once its rail running system engages with the track, the machine no longer depends on its normal tracked movement alone. The rails guide its direction while the excavator structure above remains free to perform the handling work. That combination separates mobility from work. The lower system determines where the machine can travel. The rotating upper structure, boom, and attachment determine what it can do once it gets there. Now the machine can move along the railway itself, reach material positioned beside the track, and use its boom to lift and reposition railway ties. Instead of bringing a conventional excavator beside every section of track, the machine becomes part of the rail operation. This is the opposite of the flyover bridge we saw earlier. There, engineers modified the route so a giant load could pass. Here, they modify the machine so it can use the route already available. And the final machine takes that idea one step further. The excavator does not arrive here ready to work. It arrives as a collection of major components. Sections are unloaded and positioned around the assembly area. The excavator body, boom, and specialized undercarriage have been separated so each part can be transported independently before the machine is rebuilt at the destination. Assembly begins from below. The large amphibious track structures are prepared first, creating a completely different base from the compact crawler system found beneath a conventional excavator. These sections have to be positioned accurately because everything above them will ultimately depend on their alignment. Cranes and other machines handle the heavy components, while workers guide connections at close range. The excavator body is brought together with the specialized lower structure. Pins, joints, and mounting points have to line up before the separate pieces can function as one chassis. The boom is handled in the same way. Suspended by lifting equipment, it is brought toward the machine slowly while workers control its position around the connection points. Once aligned, the major structural pieces can be joined, and the excavator begins regaining the familiar shape of a working machine. But the structure underneath it is now fundamentally different. The cabin and upper body sit above a much broader specialized track system, giving the completed excavator the configuration required for amphibious work. What is striking here is that transportation and machine design cannot really be separated. The machine had to be divided because its completed form would be far more difficult to move. Those pieces then had to survive unloading, handling, and reassembly before the excavator could become operational again. So the same principle that began our journey with the giant crane returns at the end. Large machines are often possible precisely because they do not have to travel as complete machines. They can be separated. They can be carried by specialized transporters. The road can be controlled around them. A weak bridge can be bypassed. A ship can take them across long distances. A rail system can become their guide. And when conventional infrastructure is no longer enough, the machine itself can be rebuilt for the environment ahead. That is the deeper engineering behind moving giants. The challenge is rarely finding one machine powerful enough to carry everything. It is designing the load, the transporter, the route, and the final machine so that each one solves the limit created by the last.